welcome again to another episode on Talk Architecture podcast with your host, Naziaty Muhammad Yaacob. And we are following and continuing the series on the architecture education and how it needs to be transformed. And the second part was regarding dialogic studio critique methods in architecture education. We gave an introduction on what is that, and we are continuing on going deeper in part 2B. So there are common dialogic critique methods that we know of. We had mentioned about the key principles, but now we're going into the practical methods drawn from the architectural pedagogy research and practice. The first one is the round table or Harkness method. Students and tutors sit in a circle or oval table for equal discussion. Everyone draws, sketches ideas, or responds collaboratively. This breaks hierarchy. Tutors sit alongside students. Used for mid-stage reviews. Promotes drawing as dialogue. We didn't actually sit on the table. We sat on chairs in a circle. And what was important is that you could see everyone from where you are. There's nobody sitting outside of the circle. It sort of gives a level playing field, or that everyone have the equal right to the dialogue. And we could go in a circle one by one to say what we please or what we need to say. That's one of the important ideas with regard to this round table method. And we find that, just say, if we make sure that everybody speaks, there's encouragement if somebody doesn't want to speak so much, because you can see the eye contact. I mean, you can see someone not peering from behind somebody else, but equally, you could just ask questions if you're not clear about what they said. And this is like in the context of the common way is that you have a classroom setting where the lecturer is in front and the students are in rows of seats, and the ones at the back would like to hide from the discussion. This one gives an impactful way to communicate in terms of you can't hide. And what you say is worthy of the discussion, and that you're a part of the group, and that I've heard of that method being used to actually, if somebody can't be in the group and they don't want to be in the group, they can leave. It's like, it's important to be in the group. So this method, particularly with architecture education, if you have the sketching of ideas equally, then you need to sit in an oval table, a circle table, or you can have them seated in one of those chairs that have the side table where you could open up and use that to sketch your ideas. Now, that's really important to have a dialogic critique, and that's something that is doable to be done in most places. Now, you go to the second one, which is peer crits, or a structured peer feedback. So in here, students critique each other's work in pairs or small groups, guided by prompts, which is what works, what could evolve, why. Informal peer chats are valued for freedom. Formal sessions ensure structure. Students judge what feedback to accept and building autonomy. Now, people who are their peers giving feedback, meaning that if they work in pairs or small groups, mean that there's always somebody presenting to the others, and in discussion, it could be sitting down, for example, rather than standing up, and it becomes a discussion in that group, and it needs to be guided by prompts because there needs to be a structure so that it is acceptable or valuable as a formal learning session. And what it is that this person who is giving feedback went through the same process as the one that is presenting their work, or their work is the focus of their discussion. So this person who's giving them the feedback has gone through the same process, and it's important that it's structured in a way that the tutor is at the back there somewhere, and they go through it because it is instructed to do so. But once they started talking to each other, normally they don't talk that way, or they might not have that communication with each other in informal classroom or studio settings. So that's really a good way to encourage them to talk to each other and give their opinions. So it is something that they want, really, but because of the way the culture is, they don't. You'd think that they do, but they don't. So that, and they want, really, secretly or not. It's like, what does your peer think about what your work is? It's a very good way of doing a dialogue, and that's one of it. Number 3 is group crits or panel discussion with student involvement. Well, having said, I've already done in my studio the first one, roundtable. I've already did peer crits as well. I did not do enough, but I've done. You know what I mean? So, especially for second year, when people, it's something that's new for them. They never had other people giving crits to them, always their tutors. If it's a practice that is common, they would appreciate it more, and they could have this informal discussion later. So number 3 is group crits or panel discussions with student involvement. We have group crits, and we do, I have encouraged students to be involved as well, and that they take turns. So the person who presented earlier, they would be involved in the discussion, or they'll be involved with the discussion. Maybe they just had a fresh presentation, or they were the one presenting their work in a group crit or panel discussion, and then suddenly they have the chance to say something. So it's kind of very fresh. And so it says here that whole cohort or small groups discuss one project. Students lead questions or rotate roles. Includes dialogic inquiry, where feedback is classified. That is suggestive probing, to encourage tennis-like exchange, ping pong or tennis. Don't. It's like it could be really, really insightful for people who are observing, and also especially those whose work is being discussed. And it's good for master planning. We have a project that is a group project. Because, concerns could be aired out at that time, and a lot of things can be unpacked where, some of it, the students will answer themselves, and where it's difficult for them and they need guidance, then the tutor can come in. So it becomes more of a collaborative effort when you have this group crits with students involvement. So the fourth one is a formative desk crits as true dialogue. Transform one-to-one or one-on-one desk crits into conversations. Tutor asks open questions. Student explains intentions, mutual exploration, limits time but deepen exchange combined with written follow-ups. This importance of follow-ups to that discussion is immense. And I don't take it for granted when I was a tutor that there'll be a follow-up to what we discuss, and I will remember what was previously being discussed as well. Usually, let's just say we have 20 minutes for one person. When you start open questions rather than, when I talk about open questions, I would like to say here that for architecture, we can ask the why questions. Often in other knowledge streams, the why question comes at a postgraduate level. But in design studios, you can ask the why questions. And students, in 20 minutes, they could come to the point where after 20 minutes, they realize that they're answering the what and the how, but not the why, because what is important about a topic for one student may be different to another student. The why question is such a game changer sort of question. I mean, what question? The student can just literally go and find out the definition of what it is, like a wet market or a community center or an elderly care home. They could say, oh, it's for to blah, blah, blah. And how do you design? And then you have to consider this. But why is that elderly care center important? That is when there is history, there is context, you have to understand people. And whether they did a deeper research into the topic or whether they observed enough when they went for the site visit. And it is such a great thing when you ask this open questions where the students just understood that that's very important to ask open questions later in life and later in the different projects. It sort of set them up for the later years when they are in master's course, really. And they'll become they will seek things out. They'll be curious. And if all lecturers or the academics appreciate the why questions being asked, rather than just thinking where is what and how you're solving things, is there. You can actually grade or you can actually evaluate the what and the how, but the why is when students actually can create a story or a better narrative. Later on, they won't be so mechanical about it. So the fifth thing here on dialogic critique methods, the common ones are the narrative-based dialogic design, NDD. Students decentralize the self by adopting others' narratives, that is the users or the stakeholders, promotes polyphonic practice, reflect on authorship and power. Especially when a project at second year level in the second semester, we always try to get a project like a kindergarten or an elderly care or something to do with the user and a specific type of user in population. In the first year, there's always this homeless shelter, but we're more in a mechanical or logical sort of functional exploration. But in the second year, when you start thinking about the identity of an architect, which is someone who concerned with the social issues and the social context, we see the relationships of human beings of certain demographics and how they relate. One is the students themselves relating to them. Another is representing them. There are also projects that they have to design for a client who they met either online or on site. Maybe an artist and they require certain things to happen in their design, and the students meet these people, and they have to actually adopt those other people's narratives. So it's either a group of people or a specific client, and they have to adopt the narratives and somehow imagine collaborating with them and coming out their interpretation, always in thinking about the other person and not only thinking about themselves. So there are multiple voices involved in this you call polyphonic practice. So this gives a reflection on the authorship and power, where you are actually acting on behalf of the client and interpreting them. So therefore, there is this power shift, or power is given to you. Not power shift, sorry. Power is given to you to represent the other person. That's very, very deep and very powerful, in fact. So number 6, last but not least, hybrid or alternative formats. 1, pinups with rotating commentators. 2, online digital crits post-pandemic, using shared screens for real-time annotation. And 3, red dot reviews, anonymous sticky notes written plus verbal combos. This is quite something that has been done. Pinups with rotating commenters. Okay. Yeah, this is kind of straightforward. We do that a lot, and we have a bunch of people, critiques coming in. Shall we say, this person go first, and the next pinup, the other person go next, and sometimes we have all of them say something. I think it's not necessarily like that. You can decide not to comment for one pinup and then comment on the next pinup, because there is something about learning from different people. But those people have to be strong, each of them, the critiques. Digital crits, we've done a lot of this in post-pandemic. During the pandemic, we had to do that, and we do it post-pandemic. And there's real-time annotation on the screen. It's quite effective because you can record it, and the students also share as a group the understanding. Red dot reviews, okay. Anonymous sticky notes. I did the Delphi method in my PhD thesis, where somebody comments and you know that that person is an expert on that issue, but you don't know who exactly. So then you comment on that comment. You comment on that comment, and that could be interesting because you may not agree with it, or you may agree with it, and why. So it's like kind of reinforce the comment, or kind of like a counter attack, or counterative to what that has been said. Now, lastly, I would like to mention here in this particular episode, to finish it up, I'm not going to do a part 3. I'm going to finish this off on the common dialogic critic methods, going into the benefits of architecture education, especially in contexts like in Malaysia, how this would empower the student voice, encounters product mentality, encourages transformation over credentials. It's not just a paper chase. It's what you want to do in university, what you want to gain, what you want to be transformed, rather than just replicating or mimicking. Because you're not gonna learn. You're not gonna be a different person who, still in your comfort zone. So you need to have your own voice, basically. Now, the thing about the student voice it's not necessarily in architecture education, it's in any education. That's why when I said the shall we say, the cut-off point where people actually decide to be an architect is the second year. Because if you're going to wait until your third year before you decide that you're going to be an architect, you're already in the architecture course. And you sort of, there are late bloomers, but that's a lot of time for you to be around in the course, and then you decide you want to be an architect or not. But by second year, you can see the potential of the student being an architect and doing the master's course, because you can see that person loves architecture. And that is being shown in the student's voice. When the student, you can see they're driven, they're really into it, the voice will be different. Not timid, not frightened, not like, tentative, but more there is strength and gravity. So that shows a transformation. Number two, for benefit of architecture education with regard to the dialogic critique methods, is builds ethical, reflective practitioners, which aligns with Aristotle eudaimonia, flourishing through virtue, and Confucius junzi, exemplary person via ethical growth. So there's there is that voice, and then there is that sense of purpose, which builds on a foundation of ethics. And yes, if you are seeking knowledge and truth, you will be pursuing architecture from that point of view, because you see the worthiness. Architecture is worthy. You are worthy of doing architecture. Architecture is a subject that is important to you. So the third one is improves engagement and equity, reduces fear, supports diverse viewpoints. This is something that is underrated. Equity, meaning that you see other people's points of views, and they could be tinged with racism or sexism or ageism, whatever, extremes or some tendencies on the right and the left. And you are there in that conversation, and you're equal in that conversation, being able to express without having fear. So therefore it reduces the fear, because you're in that combat zone without, which is protected, which is safe. And the tutor needs to create that sort of environment. So number 4 is prepares for practice, where you know that in the real architecture involves dialogue with clients, teams, and communities. Obviously, every single semester, every project, you can feel that you're connected to the practice of practitioners outside. And you will have conversations with them regarding, work. And sometimes they give you work to do. Who knows, and they visit, you visit their office, or you visit the work that they have done, and you listen to, although you may not really understand it, what they have to say about their work. It's something for becoming familiar with practice. So at the end of this, what are the implementation tips on the dialogic critique methods? The implementation tips are that you start small, you introduce peer crits early. We talked about peer crits just now. Train students in giving and receiving feedback. There is training involved, so that they can go through the process and they could evaluate themselves when they understand that what the process is. And yeah, peer crits is great, especially in the first and the second year. So the second one is you shift praxis, move from assessment focus to comprehension focus. Often people say, "Oh, is this a B plus? Is this an A work? Is this a C?" I mean, yes, but that sort of when we start talking about that, I mean, I've made that mistake. That is a mistake, when we are just doing assessment focus. And our students will say, how many pages do you need for them to pass? So, okay, certain amount. But this is a distraction away from the learning, the comprehension of what they learn. And it's always a mistake that we do, and we need to realize that we do this mistake and move on away from this to be much more about the learning and the comprehension. So the third one is evaluate, use students' reflections on thematic. Use students' reflections or thematic analysis to refine. It's always great when you use what people had said and reflect on it, because that means you're paying attention to what's being said, and also you give your take on what has been said. Especially thematic analysis is what is the theme, rather than you going, you're not focusing on the theme. I mean, you're talking about elsewhere, you're giving an analogy or an example elsewhere. It's difficult for people to comprehend when you do so. So it's best to focus on the theme at hand and what has been said. Fourth is the challenges, time constraints, resistance to change, and need for tutor training. It's true. Tutors need to be confident of this dialogic critique methods and not just relying on instructional and hoping that the student get it. We are so away from that. We should not do that at all, because I'm using the word should because we are not helping ourselves if we become, this is a university, and even in a secondary school, we need to have this sort of dialogic critique method as well. So that's without having to say so much. We need to have tutor training if tutors are not keen to do this. So there has to be some getting out of your comfort zone and thinking about how to make this learning experience much better. So in conclusion, these methods are gaining traction globally, with studies showing improved learning outcomes and student satisfaction. In Malaysian studios, facing Malaysian Board of Architects pressures and key performance indicators focus, adopting dialogic approaches would reclaim the higher purpose of education, nurturing innovative, ethical architects who flourish and contribute to society. And so it has to be said that that is what is necessary if we were to do the dialogic critique methods. So with that, I'd like to conclude part 2B, and we shall talk about more of this much later. We stop here with the transformation of architecture education, and give us some time to think about this. And much later, we will talk about in depth on the case studies of dialogic critiques in architecture education. I would discuss it in much more detail from my point of view. But for now, we are going to do a couple of episodes reacting to certain things that emerged recently. Thank you very much.